Hey everyone, welcome to the Kion Fasting Challenge. We're so excited to have you here. There's over 10,000 of you joining us for this 5-day mind, body, and spirit reset, and we're just super grateful that you're on this journey with us, so welcome. I am jumping on the Kion Instagram channel today to talk to you specifically about fasting for women. We got a ton of questions about this topic, and today I'm going to do my best to dive into it, answer your questions, and give you some really clear guidelines and tips. And what I'll talk about today is what the science says about fasting for women, the safest ways that women can fast, different warning signs to look out for, maybe signs that fasting isn't right for you or you need to sort of reevaluate your fasting practice. And then I'll also tell you what fast I'm doing for the fasting challenge because I'm doing it with you. So stay tuned for a lot of good tips at the end here. But first of all, who am I? My name is Kelsey and I'm the content manager for Kion. I've worked for Kion and with Ben Greenfield for several years now. I'm also a certified nutrition coach and women's health and thyroid specialist. So I've dabbled in women's health quite a bit. And so hopefully I can help you find the right fasting practice for you today and determine whether or not it is something that you should be experiencing right now. And a quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor and I don't play one on the internet, and neither does anyone at Kion. So definitely don't take this as medical advice. Please see your qualified healthcare practitioner if you have any very specific health questions or health concerns. This is just for informational purposes only. So let's jump into fasting for women. So what does the science actually say about fasting in women? Do we actually have a different response to fasting than men? And to be completely honest with you here, there's not a ton of conclusive research. The studies that we do have are mostly done in mice, but they do actually show that women have a different response than men. For example, they show that women are more sensitive to dietary and caloric shifts, and that typically leads to a lowering of our reproductive hormones. Excessive fasting or calorie restriction has been shown to disrupt the secretion of a hormone called gonadotropin releasing hormone, and that's basically the precursor to our reproductive hormones, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. So fasting and calorie restriction can actually lower our reproductive hormones in some women. One study also showed that blood sugar control actually worsened in women after 3 weeks of intermittent fasting when compared to men. And there's also, just a lot of anecdotal stories out there about women experiencing a loss of menstrual cycle or other hormonal changes when they start intermittent fasting. And while we can't make conclusive statements off of those few studies alone, we can infer that maybe that women have to take a couple of cautionary steps when practicing fasting and when changing their diet or changing calorie intake. And while this seems unfair, it actually makes sense from a physiological perspective. Women's bodies are incredible. We're designed to grow and nurture a tiny human. And that requires a lot of energy and nutrients. And when either of those things are low, our body sort of shuts down reproductive function, kind of like, whoa, okay, this probably isn't a good time to start growing a baby. She's stressed, she doesn't have enough food, she's not sleeping well, so we need to abort the mission of growing a child. And, even if you have no interest in growing kids right now, or having kids, or ever, it's still really important for your body to have adequate levels of these reproductive hormones. They keep your bones healthy, they keep your brain healthy, they make for glowing skin and luscious hair, and so they're really important to your health and your physical health and your mental health regardless. So that's why we're having this conversation, because when fasting, when not done correctly, it can have detrimental effects on your health. But it can also be done safely in a way that supports your vibrancy and supports your health overall. And that's what I want to walk you guys through today. Like what can we do to still maybe benefit from fasting and not sort of torch our hormones in the process. And so I want to go into that, but first I want to start with, if you have practiced fasting, if you've tried it before, here are warning signs to look out for that maybe the way that you practiced it, or maybe just fasting in general, is potentially not a good idea right now, or you should reconsider the way that you've been practicing it. And so a lot of those signs come from the shift in reproductive hormones, right? So a lot of those look like irregular menstrual cycles or loss of period. So if you have started fasting and you lost your period or your menstrual cycle became irregular, you might want to reconsider and definitely listen through this video to hear my tips at the end. Another one is inability to lose weight. As women, since we are more sensitive to calorie restriction, we actually sometimes tend to hold on to weight when we aren't getting enough calories, as backwards as that might seem. Another one is poor sleep. You could have decreased athletic performance or recovery. So maybe you're just not performing as well in the gym as you used to. You could be slowly healing. So any wounds, if they're healing really slowly, or injuries. If you have negative changes to your mood, binge eating or strong food cravings, acne or dry skin, if your libido tanks, if you're always feeling cold, like your hands and feet are cold, if you're losing hair, and then a more serious one, if you're having irregular heartbeats. Those are all signs that if you are practicing fasting, or you have, and you have these things come up, you should probably reconsider or take the steps that I'm going to talk to you about later to make sure that you're fasting safely and you're taking care of your body while you're doing that. And while that all sounds like really bad news, I'm not necessarily saying that, no woman should fast. I think despite the risks, many women have positive experiences with fasting, and it can be part of a healthy lifestyle, but it has to be done correctly. And so I would say one of the things that a lot of women do when they start fasting is they stack it on top of an already stressful lifestyle. And fasting itself, as you probably know, is a hormetic stressor, right? Like, it's a good stress on the body when practiced appropriately, but we often make it even more stressful when we combine it with a lot of these other things. So when you combine fasting with calorie restriction, as I mentioned, is a stressor on the body, especially the female body. So when you're fasting and you're restricting calories, you're probably going to see a lot of the things that I mentioned. An extremely low carb diet can also be stressful for some people. This is very individual, right? Like, some women do well on low carb diets, some women don't. So definitely pay attention to your own body, but that can be stressful. So if you're doing intermittent fasting and keto, and you're getting some of those symptoms that I talked about, that could be a sign that you maybe shouldn't be doing both. You maybe shouldn't be fasting. Just reevaluate that. Another one is exercising too intensely during fasting periods. So I know it can be really tempting to use that fasting window as a way to do a really tough exercise, because sometimes it feels good and you don't feel as heavy. But when you exercise too intensely during your fasting period, you're definitely spiking your cortisol a lot more, and that can be troublesome for women. So I would just say, some low rep heavy strength training can be good during that fasting period. Maybe some low steady state cardio can be good, but the burn and the HIIT and the Orange Theory and stuff in that morning fasting window, a lot of women experience some negative side effects from that and can actually have the opposite effect on body composition for some people. And then finally, if you're fasting during a stressful time, that's adding more stress to your body as well. So if you're moving, if work is stressful, if kids are stressful, if it's just a hard time in life, don't practice fasting. Show your body some love, show it some rest, and just make sure you're getting a lot of sleep. And that way you won't be experiencing a lot of those negative side effects from fasting. Another thing I want to mention is fasting might not be a good idea for certain groups of women, and I'll go into that. But if you fall into any of these groups, definitely reconsider your fasting practice. Definitely watch the end of this video where I talk about the safest ways to fast for women, and just pay special attention to your body. You may not want to fast at all if you fall into one of these groups. And so the first one is lean women. That's sort of vague, but less than 18% body fat. You might just not have the adequate body fat storage. You'll be on that really fine line of potentially losing a period if you get too lean and you're just fasting too often or too long. Young women and teens don't need to fast. Your autophagy and your cellular health is great when you're a teenager, and unless you're working for a specific medical reason, you probably don't need to fast. Athletes or extremely active women, again, you need a lot of nutrients, you need a lot of calories to support your physical activity. So definitely don't partake in too much extended fasting. If you have a history of eating disorders, you probably want to stay away from fasting or at least work with a medical practitioner if you have a reason to do it. Sleep disorders, it can exacerbate those. If you have low progesterone, that could be tied to subclinical hypothyroidism. And so if you have subclinical hypothyroidism, meaning your thyroid hormones are low, you actually might not want to fast at all. You actually might want to do the opposite and be in a calorie surplus for a while. A lot of women give themselves subclinical hypothyroidism by calorie restricting, by working out too hard, by being stressed out, and they downregulate their thyroid hormone, which leads to low progesterone and then infertility, and it's kind of a vicious cycle. So if you fall into any of those groups, probably don't want to fast. I'm not necessarily talking about autoimmune thyroid, which I'll get into a little bit later. This is subclinical hypothyroidism. If you struggle with infertility, irregular periods, or amenorrhea, fasting may just make all of those things worse. You actually probably want to be in a calorie surplus. And then if you're planning for pregnancy, if you are pregnant or you're breastfeeding, definitely don't fast. You want to get as many nutrients as you possibly can for yourself and that growing baby. So if you fall into that group, I wouldn't fast any more than 10 hours, which you can easily do overnight. So if you fall into any of those groups, take special precautions with fasting, and you might not want to fast at all. However, if you are healthy and you don't have any of the health issues that I just mentioned, there are safe ways that you can fast and take advantage of the mental health benefits, the immune system benefits, the gut health benefits, the longevity benefits of fasting. And so I will go into those now. So unless there's a medical reason, you probably don't need to do the 5-day extended water fast. Unless you're on some sort of spiritual quest or you're working with a doctor for a medical reason, it's actually better for women to do shorter, less frequent fasts. And so the top 3 that I would recommend for a healthy female is number 1, the crescendo method. So that's fasting for 12 to 16 hours, and you do that 2 to 3 days a week. Ideally, that's done on non-consecutive days and days that are not very active. So you're not doing your intermittent fasting on your super hard workout days. You're doing them on your rest days where you're doing yoga or walking or light activity. Eat, stop, eat. This is also just known as like a weekly or bi-weekly 24-hour fast. And that's also done preferably on rest days. So you could potentially, kind of like Ben Greenfield does, go from Saturday dinner to Sunday dinner every 1 or 2 weeks. And on that Sunday, you're having a rest day, you're using sauna, light swimming, some yoga, and just kind of resting on that day. And you can also do the occasional prolonged caloric liquid fast. And if you read Fasting Decoded, you know that's one of our options for fasting for this week. And this is basically a fast that's done taking in some calories from what we call liquid, but you could also do like a fasting mimicking diet. It could be a bone broth fast, a juice fast, whatever, but you can practice this for 3 to 5 days. And for women, I don't really recommend more than on a quarterly basis. And so it's usually 1 to 4 times a year that you practice that. So the 3 safest methods for women, 2 to 3 days a week of intermittent fasting for 12 to 16 hours on your non-active days. You could do every 1 to 2 weeks a 24-hour fast, or you could do 1 to 4 times a year a prolonged caloric liquid fast for 3 to 5 days. So those are some of the safest ways to fast as a female. With that being said, if you do decide to engage in a fasting practice, there are some tips to take advantage of the benefits of fasting without sabotaging your hormones and getting all the negative side effects that I talked about before. So here are those. Avoid excessive intense exercise during your fasting. So whether that's intermittent fasting or an extended fast, don't do the CrossFit, don't do the long distance running, don't do the Orange Theory or the Burn class. Just opt for, if you really want to, low rep strength training, low intensity cardio like hiking or swimming or doing some yoga. Number 2, prioritize your sleep. Get to bed early, sleep as long as you can, because sleep's effects on hormones are profound, and sleep deprivation is really the fastest way to kind of wreck your hormones. So make sure you're getting a lot of good quality sleep. When you do eat, get adequate calories from nourishing foods during your feeding windows, especially prioritizing healthy fats and protein that can support that hormone balance. If you struggle to get enough protein, you can take some essential amino acids. Kion has some EAAs that are awesome, and those can help with estrogen production and your reproductive cycle and balancing your hormones. And finally, do everything you can to minimize stress during your fasting period. You don't want to stack fasting on top of other stressors, and just make sure that you're giving yourself a lot of time to breathe, rest, take a bath, read a book, do a lot of really restorative things during your fast so that your body gets the signal that it's a safe time and it doesn't need to downregulate any of those reproductive hormones. So yes, fasting does affect women differently. We do know this from even the small amount of studies that are out there, and we know it anecdotally and physiologically. It does make sense, right? We're meant to grow these tiny humans, and we need a lot of nutrients and a decent amount of calories to do so. However, yes, you can take advantage of the health benefits of fasting even as a female. If you just pay attention to your body, you look out for the signs and symptoms that I mentioned, and practice the 3 safest methods of fasting for women, you can still reap a lot of the benefits, be super vibrant and super healthy, and have a great hormone balance when doing so. So I hope that helped. Now I actually want to jump into your specific questions that you submitted to us for this Q&A. So I will do that as I'm going. If you do have more questions, drop them in the comments below. And like I said, I will personally answer them and hopefully give you the resources that you need. Okay, so the first question is, are there times during our menstrual cycles when we should or should not fast? This is a really good question. I love this question. And potentially, yes, there's not a lot of conclusive science to back up what I'm about to say, but during the first half of your cycle, estrogen is higher, and that actually keeps you a little bit more satiated and not as hungry and not as like craving foods. In the second half of your cycle, your progesterone is higher, and while that's a fat-burning hormone, your metabolism actually revs up a little bit, so you can actually be a lot hungrier if you're fasting during the second half of your cycle. So for most women, that could be day 15 to 28 or 30, right after you ovulate. So the easiest time to fast would actually be between the last day of your period and ovulation. So right in the middle of that first half of the cycle, day, say 5 to 14. You're probably gonna be less hungry, you're gonna have a little bit more estrogen to keep your energy levels high, and it's gonna be a little bit easier. So I would say that's probably the best time for most women to fast, and that they'll find it a lot easier. Okay, what are the effects of fasting and ketosis on thyroid, adrenals, and cortisol levels? Last time I did a strict ketogenic diet, my T3 went down to super low levels. That's also a really good question. I kind of talked about a ketogenic diet and fasting, and that being a little bit dangerous if you're combining the two for some women. So I would say if your question is, I combined the two and my thyroid levels went down, that probably means it's not a great idea. Low carb diets as well as fasting can sometimes decrease that thyroid level when they're combined. However, I would say while thyroid hormone does decrease during a fasting period, upon refeeding, it will actually go back up. And so that's kind of the magic in the refeed, right? If you're fasting and then you're refeeding with adequate calories, thyroid hormone level just goes back up. So unless you're fasting too much or too long, it should be okay for the thyroid levels. Again, if you have subclinical hypothyroidism though, you might not want to really fast at all. You actually probably want to do the opposite. If you're having thyroid and adrenal issues, you probably want to eat in a calorie surplus. Make sure you're getting enough healthy fats and carbohydrates to support that. So I hope that helps. If you are seeing your T3 going down, work with a doctor that specializes in thyroid, and you probably actually want to eat more and exercise less, honestly. Fasted workouts for some or too much stress. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit too. Fasted workouts can be fine as long as you aren't going too hard, so stick with the light cardio or the low rep strength training. If you're refueling with properly with adequate calories, if you aren't overloaded with stress in the rest of your life, and you aren't experiencing any of the warning signs I talked about previously. I would love more information on multiple day fasts for women. Are they generally not recommended? I would avoid the multiple day fast if you fall into any of the cautionary groups above. However, if you're doing them for gut health, autoimmunity, or have a significant amount of weight to lose and you're working with a doctor, they might be beneficial. I would just keep them to like 1 to 2 times a year and do like a caloric liquid or fasting mimicking diet fast instead of the strict water fast. Please address intermittent fasting if it should be approached differently if you are a postmenopausal woman. Okay, so yeah, a lot of the things that I've warned you about are about reproductive hormones and how they can get downregulated, about lean women, about breastfeeding women, about people trying to get pregnant. And so yeah, if you're postmenopausal, you actually might not see a lot of those negative effects from fasting because you don't have those delicate hormones that you're dealing with, and you don't have the chance of getting pregnant. So the body might not necessarily like down-regulate a lot of those things. So you could benefit a little bit more from fasting, and maybe you can get away with longer fasts or more frequent fasts. Most women that I hear about that do very well with fasting or a low-carb diet are typically postmenopausal. So there's just like less of a fine line there for you. So again, pay attention to your body. If it makes you feel like you want to binge eat during your feeding cycles, or you're actually gaining weight instead of losing weight, or having any brain fog issues, or not sleeping well, even if you're postmenopausal, it might not be a good idea. You might just need to like reconsider whatever fasting practice that you are doing. So that's what I would say there. And I believe that maybe all of our questions. Let me double check. Okay, so I'm a healthy, active menopausal woman. Should I end my fast when I feel symptoms of brain fog or have the inability to string words together? Maybe. I don't know how long you're fasting from that question. I will say if you're doing an extended fast and you're on like day 2, that can sort of just occur as your body's switching from burning glycogen to burning fat. So you're switching from, burning food for fuel to burning body fat for fuel. And in that transition period, you can kind of get some brain fog and feel sort of tired. Maybe you just need to go to bed early or take a bath or, something to get over that hump. But as you get to day 3 to 5, that should go away. Like the ketones should kick in. You should feel kind of like you have a lot more energy and can focus. So if you're around that time period, maybe it's a good time to stop. Maybe something's going on and it's not the right time for you. So that's what I would say there. It's hard to say without knowing how long you're actually fasting for. Okay, so this one's a really long question. I won't read the whole thing, but it's basically she's been intermittent fasting 12 to 16 hours daily, but then lost her period. And while she felt fantastic, gained some body fat and the period became irregular. Rarely hungry, feels bloated. I felt better when I was intermittent fasting, but what gives with the period? Is there a way to get the best of both worlds, especially if my husband and I are considering family planning? Okay, this is a deep one, and it kind of touches on a lot of the things we've already talked about, but I would say it is common to feel great when you're intermittent fasting because you are getting, a little bit more of the ketosis benefits, the fat burning, the mental clarity, etc. But if you're young, if you're trying to get pregnant, daily 16-hour fasts is probably not a good idea. I would say like the first thing is if you're getting some gut effects there, feeling bloated, maybe do a gut test, see if you've got some SIBO. That can definitely feel a lot better if you're not eating because you're not sort of stirring up all of that bacteria and the gas buildup there. So do a gut test and see what the root of it is, right? Because like a lot of the times when you have some stuff going on, fasting feels like the answer, because you are sort of just eliminating whatever's triggering that, whether it's food sensitivities or some sort of bacterial overgrowth. And when you start eating again, you kind of didn't really fix the problem. So fasting can be part of a regimen to fix SIBO or do some gut healing or help with food sensitivities. But if you're not doing anything else to sort of address the root cause of those, you're still going to experience those things when you eat again. And so it seems like your reproductive health is getting affected by the daily fasting, even though you feel good. I would say go to a doctor and get some gut work done. Gut tests. Get some gut tests done, get some hormone level tests done, especially if you're trying to plan for a family, and try to address the root cause of that rather than just using fasting as a band-aid. I hope that makes sense. If you really just want to sort of dabble in a few things, maybe try a low FODMAP diet, maybe just do fasting in, 3 times a week instead. And if you've lost your period, the best way to get that back is to eat in a calorie surplus, as much as a lot of people don't want to hear that. Lots of rest, and 6 months or so of eating in a calorie surplus where you're getting a lot of fat and protein and good carbs. I would say that you could follow some other accounts. 𝘍𝘢𝘴𝘵 RD is really good for getting your period back. Dr. 𝘍𝘢𝘴𝘵, check out her book, Beyond the Pill. I don't know if you're on birth control, but there's a lot of other good resources out there that can help you with that I can't really get into now. Also pay attention to the end of this video where I'm talking about fasting for gut health, and maybe a few of those things that I talk about in there could help you. So to wrap things up, I hope you're still tuned in. This is probably a really long video right now, but I thought I would show you guys what fast I'm doing for the Kion Fasting Challenge with you. So yes, I do fast. I'm a young female, I'm very active, but I also have an autoimmune disease called Hashimoto's. It's a thyroid autoimmune disease. And I've been using fasting for my health probably for the last 10 years or so in a multitude of different ways. And it's really improved my gut health, my immune system, my thyroid health, and it's actually helped me clear up some skin issues that I was having as well. So I use fasting, I use it intelligently, kind of in all the ways that I described to you guys earlier in this video. And for the Kion Fasting Challenge, I'm doing a protocol that I do a couple of times a year, usually 2 to 3 times. I'll do this as sort of a way to reset my gut health. And it's the caloric liquid fast. If you've seen our Fasting Decoded guide, that kind of walks you through how to do that one. And what I'm using for my caloric liquid is 𝘍𝘢𝘴𝘵 Metaclear. It's basically a supplement drink is how I could describe it. There's a ton of vitamins and minerals in there, but also a ton of gut healing components as well. There's some L-glutamine, some medium chain triglycerides, there's some milk thistle, a few of probiotics, and just a ton of really good stuff in there. It also tastes delicious. We have it at getkion.com. I believe we have it in the chocolate and the vanilla flavor. I like the chocolate the best, but the vanilla is also really good. And I'll usually just take 2 scoops of this in water or blend it with in ice to make a smoothie 3 times a day. And so that's my caloric liquid. It's about, I think it comes out to like around 600 calories a day with just that. So it's kind of similar to a fasting mimicking diet. And then I'll do some, this looks super weird, I'll do some bone broth in there as well. And so I make my own bone broth. You can find anywhere on Google how to make your own. This is chicken broth, but I'll do grass-fed beef bone sometimes too, and I'll heat that up. Again, I'm going for gut healing. I didn't mention that. I fast for gut healing, so I'm not worried about like a small amount of calories breaking a fast, because my goal is to improve my gut health by giving my digestion a rest, and then also feeding my gut with all of these really healing components that can help sort of restore the gut lining, which is really important in an autoimmune disease. Again, not a doctor, work with your doctor, but this is what I do. So I'll take a couple of cups of bone broth a day, heat it up. It's really nice in Colorado in the winter to have a warm liquid when you're fasting. And speaking of another warm liquid, I also will drink Kion coffee. Yes, I drink the Kool-Aid, I work for Kion, but I really, really love this coffee. It's the only coffee I drink anymore. It doesn't make me jittery when I drink it on an empty stomach. It doesn't hurt my stomach. It tastes really good. It's organic, mold and mycotoxin free, which is really, really important when you're fasting too. And so really this is the only coffee that I drink when I'm fasting, and kind of the only coffee that I drink in general. I don't always drink coffee when I fast, but in the winter I like to, just because it's a nice warm liquid and it helps with that liver detox too. Another supplement that I'll take is called 𝘍𝘢𝘴𝘵 𝘋𝘦𝘤𝘰𝘥𝘦. This is makes my gut feel bulletproof. This is a gut health supplement. It has some probiotics in there as well, and I take 3 of these twice a day while I'm fasting, sometimes not while I'm fasting too, just if I need a little bit more support. But it's called 𝘍𝘢𝘴𝘵 𝘋𝘦𝘤𝘰𝘥𝘦. We do not have this on Get Kion. You can find this on Thorne's website, but I highly recommend it if you need a little gut support. And then another supplement that I take, of course, is Kion Aminos, essential amino acid supplement. And I really like to take these in the morning, not right away, because I do like to get a little bit of autophagy benefits when I'm fasting. So I'll usually wait until 11 or 10 a.m. or so. And I take 3 of these because I'm small, so I don't take a full serving of it. And I find that 3 is perfect for mental clarity, to kind of keep my energy levels up. And this stuff also just completely kills any hunger pangs. So if you're kind of getting hungry during your fast and you're not worried about amino acids potentially interfering with autophagy, because as Ben mentioned, and we mentioned in the Fasting Decoded ebook, amino acids will stimulate mTOR, and that does affect autophagy. So if you're fasting for any other benefits, amino acids can be great to fuel your workout, and also help keep your hormones stabilized as well. So I love those things. We all love them. They're awesome. And then finally, I'll definitely throw in some good quality sea salt. I use real salt, but I mean, you can use Redmond real salt. You can use any high quality sea salt, and it just keeps your electrolyte status up when you're fasting. If you combine these 2 things, the Metaclear and salt, it tastes like a chocolate caramel salted smoothie. It's so good, especially if you get like thick Celtic sea salt and put it on top of the Metaclear smoothie. It's really good. So yeah, that's what fast I'm doing. I'm doing it with you guys, and I'm so excited that you're here doing the fasting challenge with us. We really, really love to do this every year to just provide a really awesome mind, body, spirit reset, start the new year off right, and get a lot of the health benefits that it provides, but also a lot of the mental and spiritual benefits too. You know, it's really good for you to sometimes realize where those hunger pangs come from and pay attention to those as well, and just tune in and introspect during this time. So hope you're having a great time with it. Hope you're tuning in. Let me know if you have any other comments or questions in the comments below, and stay tuned. We'll hopefully have some more Fasting for Women content coming out. Let us know if you enjoyed this. Do a little like thing, and yeah, happy fasting for the rest of the week. We hope it goes well for you.